Well, with their response to the Commissioner's report, we're now joined by Mark Gerritsen, the government's Deputy House Leader, Peter Julian, the NDP House Leader, and Mike Morris, the Green MP for the riding of Kitchener Centre in Ontario. Hello to the three of you.
Hello. Hi, good to be with you.
Nice to have you here. And listen, before we begin, we do want to acknowledge that we did invite the Conservatives to be a part of the discussion this evening, but they did not have an MP available, so let's continue going forward. And I'll begin with you, Mark, because, you know, the Commissioner says not only will Canada fall short of its international commitment, but even the current numbers are based on overly optimistic assessments of the government programs. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I mean, we accept the report from the Commissioner. The Commissioner has indicated that we're heading in the right direction, but we need to move faster, and we will obviously do that. One of the things that the report leaves out are the sectors that we're still bringing on board new programming for, such as the oil and gas sector, and our plan to put in emissions caps there. As the Minister indicated, the information and the framework for that will be forthcoming, and we should see that later this year. So I'm very confident that once we get key frameworks in place like that, we will absolutely meet those commitments that we've set out to achieve. And I think it's also really important to also reflect on the fact that, you know, the Commissioner keeps talking about we've fallen short for 30 years. And although that might be true, this government's been in place for 8 years now. And the reality of the situation is that we've had to play catch up on everything that Harper missed. So here we are playing catch up while also tackling our portion of this. And, you know, we're moving there. We have to do it. We have to move faster, and we accept and receive that information from the Commissioner.
Okay, just quickly, Mark, some clarification. So we're going to see the emissions cap on oil and gas as well as clean fuel regs, in a matter of weeks? Because you say by the end of this year, and the parliamentary calendar is running down.
The Minister said that the framework will be available by the end of this year.
Okay. Peter, what do you make of it? Given the criticisms and the government's performance, what do you make of this report?
Well, I think that's why we've been pushing so hard. I've been singing the NDP have been pushing for clean energy to ensure that we're making the investments that are so important. That's part of the bill, C-50, which is ensuring that workers can participate in that clean energy boom that can come with the right investments. We've been pushing on this. As you know, the Conservatives who didn't show up for this panel have been trying to block this legislation. And that's the problem when you have one party in the House of Commons that's climate denying. But we will continue to push the government to act. It's not simply a question of paying lip service to the environment. We know with climate change, we know with the strength of the horrendous impacts we've seen in my province of British Columbia, the heat dome that killed 600 people, the atmospheric river that cut British Columbia off from the rest of the country. These are all examples of the reality of climate change. So the government has to actually walk the talk. And the NDP has been pushing hard so that the government does that.
Mm-hmm. Mike, in your reaction, in particular since the Green Party is very much dedicated to this issue, what's your reaction to what you heard today?
Well, at a time when the UN Secretary General tells us that the global climate fight will be won or lost in this decade on our watch, what are we seeing? We're the only country in the G7 whose emissions have continued to go up over 1990 levels. And so what this report lays out really clearly is that, first of all, not only is the target that our federal government has set insufficient, it doesn't meet the science. Well, on top of that, we're not on track to meet the target. On top of that, the assumptions, the Commissioner makes clear, the assumptions that go into us not being on track, those are actually overly ambitious. And all of this before we had a carve-out on carbon pricing last week. And so it's disappointing, but it's important information for Canadians to have in order for us to push for the government to do better, because this is our kids deserve a safe climate future, and this information equips us to push for better.
Okay, Mark, you know, Mike is mentioning the carve-out for home oil heating right now, and the Commissioner did say that there's still a chance to meet Canada's targets, in particular by leaning into regulations and the carbon tax. But of course, there is now this big debate. So I'm going to ask all three of you, but I'll begin with you, Mark. Put this into context. Where do environmental concerns fit right now with the affordability concerns that Canadians are also very much expressing, given that there is also a push right now amongst some to kill the tax altogether?
Well, first of all, I just want to pick up on a comment that Peter made earlier, which is the party that happens to be missing here. You're talking to the three parties here that want to talk to you about the how. Meanwhile, the one party that's actually asking why isn't even here. So I think that should speak volumes to where the Conservative Party is on this. Now, when it comes to the affordability issue and the carve-out that we saw in recent weeks with the Prime Minister, look, the reality of the situation is that we know that heating with oil is 3 to 4 times as expensive right across the province, right across the country compared to other forms of heating. And we also know that it's the dirtiest. So the objective here was not to carve it out indefinitely. It's to put a 3-year pause on it to give people, and in particular low-income families, the opportunity to be able to transition away to a cleaner form, such as heat pumps. And at the end of the day, that's what we're really trying to achieve from this. So listen, as an environmentalist, am I thrilled about the fact that we are removing the price on pollution from one form of heating fuel? No, I'm not. But I do know at the end of the day, in the long term, we will be better off because more people will have transitioned away from home heating fuel. Now, I will say that I have all due respect for my NDP colleagues, and we get along great, especially when it comes to issues like this. But I was extremely perplexed yesterday when the NDP chose to side with the Conservatives and try to extend those exemptions for even more sectors of home heating. So you got to ask yourself, if you're so committed from the NDP's perspective to getting to those targets, and you're willing to sit here and criticize the government, why on earth would you support even creating more opportunities to remove the price on pollution, which I think is not the right direction, but unfortunately the NDP chose to do that yesterday. Okay,
well, luckily Peter Julian's sitting beside you so you can respond. Peter, what do you say to that?
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Garrison is not talking about the motion that we presented today. Jagmeet Singh just spoke in the House on this. What we have is a 3-step plan to take the GST off of home heating. That is a way that benefits everybody across the country who's struggling to heat their homes. We are in an affordability crisis, and many families are having difficulty keeping food on the table, keeping a roof over their head, and heating their homes. And so taking the GST off helps everybody, including in my province of British Columbia, including in Quebec, where they don't have a federal price on carbon. Secondly, ensuring that heat pumps are actually rolled out. Taylor Bachrach, who's the MP from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, mentioned today that the Greener Homes program has rolled out in 2 years a grand total of 438 heat pumps. Now, at that rate, to make sure all 10 million households are actually covered, it would take 55,000 years of Liberal government to actually make sure everybody gets a heat pump. That important part of the NDP's action plan is to ensure that heat pumps actually get to people. And thirdly, how do you pay for it? Well, we've seen the oil and gas sector with enormous profits, over $38 billion last year. And so having an excess profits tax to ensure that we're taking the money from these very profitable companies that aren't paying their fair share of taxes, ensuring that that pays for the heat pump program, which allows us to transition, both provide supports for families that are struggling with affordability, and more importantly, to really fight back against climate change.
But okay, but you did vote to support the Conservative motion to take the carbon tax off of all home heating yesterday. Why that? Where does that fit affordability versus the green concerns?
We thought that it was important to address the affordability issues, but as you recall, Michael, we tried to amend the Conservative motion so it actually covered British Columbia and Quebec, and the Conservatives refused. That's why our motion today is much more comprehensive, covers everything, and we're hoping that the Liberals and Mr. Garrison will be voting for this motion, which they should do if they're keeping to principle.
It certainly does cover everything, because it also covers people that, quite frankly, don't need to have that GST removed from their home heating bills. People that live in extremely big houses that can afford to pay the GST under this plan, they would not have to pay the GST on home heating. Likewise, it doesn't help people who live in apartments who might have their heating included in their rent. This won't affect them at all. So I actually think that the motion that Mr. Julian is talking about from today was extremely ill thought out. But more importantly, I just want to address one other thing that he said, and that's on the heat pumps. He said he gave you a number about the number of heat pumps that are being rolled out. That's under just one program. That's just under one program. But if you look at the total number of people throughout the country that have installed heat pumps, it's in the tens of thousands. So it's important important to reference the numbers across the entire country, not just one program.
Okay, Mark, Mark, I got to move on because I do have to get Mike in before we're completely out of time. But to the original question, Mike, where does affordability fit up against a carbon tax right now, which some Canadians are very much concerned about?
So we should be concerned about affordability, but we need to be honest with Canadians. Yes, the carbon tax went up 2 cents a litre last year. There are rebates that go with it, though. 80% of Canadians are better off financially as a result. Meanwhile, the profits of oil and gas companies last year went up 18 cents a litre. No rebates whatsoever. And so if we're going to talk about affordability, we need to be honest about the gouging that's being done by oil and gas companies across the country and the fact that right now the federal government's doing nothing about it. And they have done it already with other sectors. We have a Canada Recovery Dividend already for banks and life insurance companies. I've put forward a motion. It's part of the NDP opposition motion today to say, let's just take that same measure, apply it to oil and gas. It's been studied by the PBO already. It would provide $4.2 billion that we could use to help make life more affordable for everyday folks.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that debate tomorrow. But for now, thank you for responding to the Commissioner's report. Mark Gerritsen, Peter Julian, and Mike Morris, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you again.